We were just recounting the obscenely incompetent police response to the Uvalde shooting, and compared the official timeline with the many false claims made by the police, including claiming that the super dead suspect was in custody at one point, which seems like a really avoidable piece of misinformation. Anyway, thanks for sticking with us if you are, in fact, sticking with us. As a reward, here's an adorable picture of a cartoon shoe. Nothing sad about that shoe. Okay, so what failed? Besides our nation's gun laws and gun culture and partisan inaction and poor mental health care system, and let me rephrase, what failed in terms of the police? The report included a few non-police factors specific to Uvalde. For example, their proximity to the border created a lot of false alarms, and the school itself had a few safety protocols that failed. But neither of those really excuse or explain the failure of the police, which was a response to those failures. And the big takeaway, like the one I really want to stick with you here, is that there were 376 law enforcement officers there. I know I said that already, but boy, that's a lot of cops. That's almost an entire ska band's worth of cops. But what I think most of the country concluded is that the tragedy in Uvalde was due to an inept local police force. I think people told themselves that to feel like this is an isolated failure of a handful of specific cops. And yes, it is absolutely true that the Uvalde School District Police had active shooter training and completely failed to use that training when first responding to the event, except for that one guy who nobody followed. That training stating that police should immediately engage with an active shooter to prevent additional deaths, which, again, they didn't do. Again, except for the single officer I mentioned before, no one followed him in. But here's the thing. There, of course, aren't 376 local Uvalde cops. And in fact, according to that official report I've been referencing, the majority of cops there were federal and state law enforcement. On the scene, there were 91 officers for the Texas Department of Public Safety, aka the state police, whose responsibilities specifically include, quote, mass attacks in public places. Only 25 people there were Uvalde police officers, and 16 more were sheriff's deputies. The rest were stadies, neighboring police forces, border patrol officers, fucking DEA, and U.S. Marshals. My point here being that this group of blue-clad gawkers basically represented a sample size of every type of police force available. This wasn't Officer Turtle and his bumbling gang of gumps. This was the fucking police. Cops you would encounter in any state, in any city, all ignoring that active shooter training and not engaging with the gunmen. And so, to quote the report for the millionth time, Uvalde CISD and its police department failed to implement their active shooter plan and failed to exercise command and control of law enforcement responding to the tragedy. But these local officials were not the only ones expected to supply the leadership needed during this tragedy. Hundreds of responders from numerous law enforcement agencies, many of whom were better trained and better equipped than the school district police, quickly arrived on the scene. Those other responders, who also had received training on active shooter response and the interrelation of law enforcement agencies, could have helped to address the unfolding chaos. 376 cops from all over the state, and only a single one was actually willing to step up and risk their life to prevent the slaughter of children. By the way, that one cop, Lieutenant Javier Martinez, doesn't look like Vin Diesel. He looks like this, which in some communities is sexier than Vin Diesel. Anyway, I don't know if he's a good cop or not. I generally don't have good things to say about cops, but hey, good job trying to save children this one time. Sorry the other 375 cops with you weren't willing to do the same. Because, as some people discovered in the days following, cops do not have a constitutional duty to protect a person from harm, even if that person is a child. They are what we, to be frank, have been saying they are on this very show for years. Despite movies and politicians and cops themselves claiming otherwise, the police don't exist to run toward danger. No, you're thinking of firefighters. Cops, on the other hand, are there to protect property and enforce laws. Despite being taught that they're heroes, they aren't actually trained to do heroic things. That's why they are so quick to gun down an unarmed black person because they, quote, felt threatened by them, and why they seem to be at their most run and gun when facing off against a bunch of protesters or, God forbid, a single old man. They are, for the most part, bullies. And if you've ever met a bully, you know that they tend to be cowards.
Weeks of pain in Uvalde, Robb Elementary, where the community still comes to remember 21 innocent lives lost. It's where Angelique Gomez made a split decision to save her kids from a gunman, a decision she says has led to harassment and threats by Uvalde police. She says they not only stopped her, but handcuffed her and tackled some parents to the ground.
Why are you doing it to us? And y'all can't even go in there and do it to the shooter.
Angelique says after a few minutes, she did calm down and officers uncuffed her. That's when she ran, hopped a nearby fence, and ran inside. Weeks after the shooting, Angelique says she's still being threatened with arrest. She claims she's been watched by Uvalde police in marked cars. Uvalde police have not responded to requests for comment.
I've also had a cop park here while me and my grandmother are exercising, flickering on and off his headlights, just watching us. I don't know what he's doing.
That's the story of Angelique Gomez, a mother who was detained by the police outside of Robb Elementary before going in and evacuating an entire classroom of kids. Angelique showed bravery in the face of danger, which is probably why she isn't a cop. And for whatever reason, her defiance of the police caused them to threaten her with obstruction of justice, and then straight up harass her in the following days, which perfectly illustrates what cops are actually good at doing. Being bullies. Bullies, and of course, liars. As we've pointed out here, they lied a lot about what happened. And while some of these lies might have been misunderstandings, most feel like attempts to cover their asses. As you can imagine, a lot of this came down on Uvalde School District Police Chief Pete Arredondo, who in response has woven so many inaccuracies about what he was doing that day. In that interview with the Texas Tribune, he claims that he assumed another official or department was in command, except you can clearly see him giving orders in the surveillance video. Not to mention that he co-authored the school's active shooter plan, which specifically states that the chief would, quote, become the person in control of the efforts of all law enforcement and first responders that arrive at the scene. He has since resigned from the city council and has been terminated from his job. The only other person punished was Lieutenant Mariano Pargas. He was the acting police chief for the city of Uvalde that day, and the person originally told that a child called 911 from the classroom. Information that he apparently just kept to himself. So yeah, probably good that those two guys are being held accountable. Good that they are seeing consequences for their incompetence and lying. But as I feel like I've really stressed here, these two cops weren't the only cops that were a problem. Not just in Uvalde at this one event, but like everywhere. All the time. What we saw here was just a sample of a larger problem, put under a microscope due to the horrific nature of the crime. But cops lie all the time, and perhaps they should be held accountable all the time, and also media and people in general should be a bit more incredulous about literally anything they claim. And we don't even have to dig very deep to see this. We can just look at the most high-profile cases. In the death of Breonna Taylor, an innocent woman shot by police in her own home. The no-knock warrant that led to her death was obtained when the officers lied in their affidavit to secure it. They claimed that a postal inspector had confirmed drug shipments to her home, which didn't happen. And these types of lies apparently happen all of the time to get these warrants. In the case of George Floyd, you can actually read the initial report put out by cops, which is as follows. Quote, 2 officers arrived and located the suspect, a male believed to be in his 40s, in his car. He was ordered to step from his car. After he got out, he physically resisted officers. Officers were able to get the suspect into handcuffs and noted he appeared to be suffering medical distress. Officers called for an ambulance. He was transported to Hennepin County Medical Center by ambulance, where he died a short time later. Wait. That leaves out a lot of details, doesn't it? The whole kneeling on the neck for nearly 10 minutes part, to be specific. Or when Floyd pleaded with the officers that he couldn't fucking breathe. You really have to wonder what would have happened if this press release was the only account of this event. Just like we have to wonder what lies the Uvalde cops would have stuck with if we never saw the video evidence. Hey, speaking of, the cops who beat Rodney King originally reported that he sustained, quote, minor cuts and bruises when Walter Scott was shot in the back from 20 feet away while running from a cop. That cop originally reported that he, quote, feared for his life. In all of these events, the presence of cameras were the only thing to eventually expose these lies. And so, once again, you really have to wonder, don't you? Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.